Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 384. I am so excited to have back on the show with us Dr. Ginger Nash. She's a naturopathic physician, and if you're a longtime listener, you know that my favorite guest is a naturopath. Dr. Ginger Nash was in episode 317, and she shared about hormone health, and her specialty is helping women to balance hormones naturally without using replacements, like hormone replacements, bioidentical hormones. She doesn't use that. She helps us to actually help the body get so healthy that it has balanced hormones. And today she's here to share so much more with us about women's health. For the male listeners, you might want to listen just because you have a wonderful woman in your life, and this would be great to pass on this information. Or maybe it's just a whole world going down the rabbit hole you've never heard of. We're pretty much going to focus on women's health, but I'm sure there's some tidbits that men will enjoy. So we're going to let everyone listen, but just know that we are celebrating women's health today with Dr. Ginger Nash. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm so excited to be back. I love your show.
It was such a pleasure having you in episode 317. I know my listeners just loved learning from you. Your website is gingernash.com. Or you also have another website, which is feminology.org. You've done a lot of really cool things since we had you on the show. Like you created a course for women around vaginal health. And we're definitely going to talk about that today. Since you were on the show last, share more with us. What's happened in your life? What's going on now?
Yeah, a lot. I'm a busy gal and I'm an Aries, so I tend to take on a lot of projects. But one of the biggest things is I've started working out of another office. So one of my offices is in New Haven, Connecticut, and I've joined another practice. My friend and colleague, Dr. Jaquel Patterson, who happens to be the president of our national organization, the Association of Naturopathic Physicians. So that's cool. Jaquel and I have known each other for a number of years. She's awesome. And she bought a practice from a Dr. Darren Ingalls, who really focused in Connecticut. As you well know, there is a tremendous amount of Lyme and other tick-borne diseases and post-Lyme syndrome. So his practice was very much focused on Lyme and those pathogens, which I am also familiar with. But Dr. Patterson brought me on as a women's health expert, and I've started doing some new therapies down there that I'm excited about, and I'd love to share more about with you and your listeners. So in two offices now, just making my life that much more complex and fun. But it's really great because, as you know, Ashley, naturopathic doctors, there's just never a day where we don't learn something new, and many days we learn many new things because it's just the body is so complex and there's just so much to learn, and there's so much in the world of natural medicine for us to continually, investigate.
Mm-hmm. You want to hire a doctor who loves learning and who's constantly learning and staying up on the science and has their mind open, willing to keep looking. If you go to a doctor who is the know-it-all, who kind of goes, diet doesn't matter, just take this prescription or whatever, and they close you off. They go, that doesn't work. That doesn't do anything. And they're not willing to even investigate or look or learn. Then you want to fire that doctor and go find a doctor who loves learning. Because
I love your passion about this, Ashley.
Right?
It's so true.
Right? I think just like in the last day, I've had 3 listeners either private message me or in the Facebook group ask about this. And it's frustrating for me because we have been raised to put doctors on a pedestal, and we give up our personal power the moment we walk into their office because we've been taught that they have all the answers and we don't know anything.
Right. And I say to people all the time, right? You know your body better than I do, but this is a journey we're going to do together,
Absolutely. You want to go to a doctor who scratches their head and goes, you know what? I don't really understand what's going on in your body, but let's discover it together. I'm going to dive into the research. Let's figure out how we can support your body holistically. Let's try to get to the root cause. I love that what you do when you work with women, you don't just go, oh, your progesterone's low here. let's slap some cream on you and go home.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doesn't solve the problem. Why is the progesterone low, and what's
Mhm.
going on in the body as a whole? And that's what you love to look at.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes, hormonal balances are part of a normal life cycle because as women, we certainly go through puberty and then we go through puberty in reverse, which is menopause and perimenopause. So, sometimes there's things that are happening in the body that may be causing uncomfortable symptoms and discomfort, but sometimes you have to normalize some of it. And that's a big role for me as a physician. Sometimes with women going through those big changes, and postpartum is another major transitional phase in a woman's life. So for those of us that have had children.
Now, something I hear is that women are going into menopause earlier and earlier in a very unnatural way because of the level of stress, physical stress, emotional stress, but also the stress of the toxicity in our life, the endocrine disrupting chemicals that we're constantly
Absolutely.
exposed to in our air,
Absolutely.
water, our food, even just touching a receipt, the bisphenol A, and touching every time you pick up a receipt from the grocery store, you're touching a chemical that is a endocrine disruptor. And so we're exposed constantly to these stressors in the body.
Hmm.
And then with the emotional stress of having to manage our elderly parents, for a lot of people, our children, our partner, our job, having to manage everything and oftentimes putting ourselves last, that all this stress is leading us into early menopause. Have you seen that in your practice?
Yeah, I really have. I really have. I mean, it's amazing that you bring that up because I just yesterday had a 42-year-old woman who does not have post Lyme syndrome or what I suspect, in many others, a lot of pathogens, because that can sometimes disrupt the endocrine system and
Mm.
cause like a premature ovarian failure. But I see more and more women that, in their early 40s, they're really starting to show signs of perimenopause,
Mm-hmm.
where the whole symphony of the female hormones, starting in the brain, of course, and then affecting the ovaries and the adrenal glands, it's all so out of whack that women are experiencing much more severe types of symptoms at an earlier age. That's a really good point, Ashley, that I definitely see in my practice. And the toxins are part of it too, of course. Yeah, all the endocrine disruptors. There's over 50,000 chemicals in our environment that weren't
Mm.
around 100 years ago. And our genetics and our epigenetics can't keep up. We're just a lot more toxic, obviously.
I think I
Yeah.
heard recently it was the World Health Organization said the world's average is age 52 for going into
Yeah.
menopause.
I've read 51, actually.
Okay, yeah.
51.
So 51, and but women in the United States more and more, and in other industrialized nations where we are overtoxic and overstressed and undernourished,
Hmm.
that we are falling into menopause 10 years early.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes, of course, women with endocrine disruptors, hormonal imbalances, more of like estrogen, inflammatory estrogen stimulation, they're maybe more prone to fibroids or endometriosis, which is more of an inflammatory condition than anything. And, if they have severe problems with their bleeding patterns, they get hysterectomies. And sometimes that can, really throw women into premature menopause, or if they've been diagnosed with breast cancer and then they're treated with chemotherapy or Lupron or these estrogen blockers. There's all sorts of chemical interventions that can and surgical interventions that can make a woman, overnight her hormone levels can really plummet. So there's those types of phenomenon that are happening more frequently as well. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
Maybe you can help us understand, should we try to stave off menopause as long as possible? Is it part of longevity that we stay in a premenopausal state or a
That's a good
perimenopausal state
question.
as much as possible?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, because of course, what happens technically with menopause is you stop ovulating. And the role of progesterone, which is only produced after an ovulation, once that corpus luteum starts secreting progesterone, the role of progesterone is hugely important for women. And in terms of balancing out the amount of estrogen they have, and of course, if you're overweight or you do have a lot of endocrine disruptor exposures, or you're toxic, et cetera, you could have a lot more estrogenic activity. Your receptors might be extra sensitive, et cetera. So the lack of that progesterone is really, really what is a big part of the sort of hallmark classic symptoms of menopause, as much as the lowering amounts of estrogen and testosterone. So it's an interesting question, right, that you bring up, because in some ways, I mean, I'm 51 and a half. I'm still menstruating every month. And in some ways, just intuitively in my body, that feels right. It feels like my youth, or my younger tissue levels of hormones and all that is being sustained, and I feel like that does sort of contribute to longevity. So I agree, like it's probably a good thing. Not that you can really stave off menopause unnaturally. I mean, it is a natural process. It is something to be embraced, and it's something that women are really coming to terms with in a positive sense, I'm happy to say. But I think, if these unnatural processes give you a premature perimenopause or menopause, then yeah, that's probably going to impact your long-term health and your longevity, because those hormones are incredibly important. Hormones are so, so powerful, and they do so many things on so many different tissues in the body. So it's really fascinating too, because human women, and I think there's like a species of whale, maybe it's sperm whales or killer whales, I can't remember, are the only species that go through menopause, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, early, because a lot of species, they are able to bear children or offspring up until much closer to the point of their death. So it is, and there's been a lot of interesting conjecture about why that is for humans, but we are one of the very few species that does go through menopause early compared to other animals. So it's kind of interesting, but we obviously have quite, humans are different in so many ways. We obviously have longer lifespan than many other animals.
I guess my understanding about progesterone is that it's like a youthful hormone, that it helps to make sure that we have strong bones, that we, I mean, you can fill in the
Yeah.
details. What is it about sort of before menopause, these hormone levels that we have? What is about these hormone levels that we want to keep as naturally balanced as possible to extend
Yeah.
our life and to extend our youth? Uh, so that tissue doesn't sag, so that we look
Yeah. Yeah.
younger, but
Yeah. And
also
we
that we have
feel good. I
healthier
mean, because
bones. Right.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And estrogen is also, the queen of female hormones, and really important for longevity and youth. And women, a lot of women who are afraid of gynecological cancers, breast cancer, uterine cancer, cervical cancer, they have misconceived notions about estrogen, because healthy levels of estrogen are incredibly important, as are healthy levels of progesterone. And these two hormones, you really can't even separate them, Ashley. They're both so important, and the relative balance of estrogen and progesterone is so important. And this is why women have, a monthly cycle where the first 2 weeks of the cycle is quite different than the second 2 weeks of the cycle, because the first 2 weeks are really driven by estrogen, and the second 2 weeks after you ovulate are driven by progesterone. And progesterone does have a specific effect on the nervous system. So it's more of the calming hormone, whereas estrogen is more of the stimulating, and problems with hyperestrogen can maybe even overstimulate the brain sometimes. And of course, if you have low estrogen, then you can have brain fog and memory issues and all of that. but it's really the relative balance, and every tissue that has estrogen receptors also has progesterone receptors. So estrogen makes the uterine lining grow. Estrogen is our main growth hormone. It makes cell turnover in the breast, whereas progesterone maintains the uterine lining. Progesterone slows down the cell turnover in the breast. So every part of your body that's being affected by estrogen, it has a balancing effect from progesterone on that same tissue. So it's really, really critical to understand. And like I said earlier, menopause is a natural part of a woman's life stages, just as puberty is. When you're having some cycles where you're not ovulating in puberty necessarily, right away, it's considered normal for young girls up to 2 years to not have regular cycles. So at perimenopause, the same thing is happening. So that's really where all the symptoms come in at puberty and at menopause, is because the body has to find and recalibrate that balance point between estrogen and progesterone again. And that happens all over, including in the vulva and the vaginal tissues, which, is another important part of the body that really is affected by both estrogen and progesterone. And a lot of women feel uncomfortable talking about this part of their body, sadly. The word vagina, classic Eve Ensler, however many years ago, must be 20 years ago now.
Monologues.
Yeah, the vagina monologues. Like, she had to make a whole Broadway show just so people could say the word vagina, and it's great, and I do think women are getting more comfortable, really being embodied. And that's certainly part of my work in feminology, is to help educate women about what normal functioning is for their body, and really learning to listen to the signals from their body, including the vaginal area and the vulvar area. And one of the things that my colleague in feminology, Dr. Tara Nyack, said when we did our little vaginal course, which I loved, was she started out with terminology, because a lot of women refer to sort of everything down there, and again, I'm doing the air quotes, down there, as the vagina, when really the vagina is actually the canal that gets penetrated during sexual intercourse. It's the vulvar area that is, on the outside of our bodies, and that we have a lot more symptomatology and a lot more familiarity with. So I do want to say, just at the outset, and I think that was so great for Tara to bring that up, that there's a lot of confusion even just about the anatomy of our own bodies, which is just so amazing, right? In 2019, that we're still,
it's almost 2020. It's almost 2020.
Yeah.
And we don't know our vulva from our vagina.
Yeah.
But now we do.
Yeah, totally. And some of the other stuff that we discussed in the course that was really fun to educate women about was how, we had this whole, magical vulvar and magical vagina, because it is this amazing self-cleaning, self-lubricating, and it makes its own hormones. It really has its own ecosystem, the vaginal canal. And, women who have imbalances in hormones, and women who have problems with chronic vaginitis, like yeast or BV, or, chronic herpes conditions, et cetera, they will tell you that when there's imbalances and symptoms in that area of the body, it can be incredibly uncomfortable and distracting, and make you feel like you can't, really think about anything else. So there's a lot of that going on in my practice. Certainly, I treat a lot of women with vaginitis and vulvodynia and problems in that area.
Well, we want to get into that. I think that's going to be very interesting. You'd mentioned that when we have, is it low estrogen, that we have the brain fog?
Yes.
So interesting symptom that I've had in my past is I'll forget nouns.
Yes.
And we'll know it's a certain time of month. My husband will look at me and be like, oh, all right, looking at the calendar. Okay, it's that time of month again. Because I'll be like, can you please put the thing in the thing? And I can't remember. And like, that thing, could they put that thing? Can you go get the thing and put the thing in the thing? And he has to guess what I'm saying. Cause I'm like, no,
In
I
my
don't
household,
remember.
we call that a Johnny. We just refer to everything as a Johnny when we don't have the noun. Like, put the Johnny in the Johnny. Over there by the Johnny is where the Johnny is.
But to know, when I learned that it was actually a hormone
Yeah.
thing, that
Yeah.
was
Does it
interesting.
happen at the very end? Does it happen at the very end of your period or just a few days after your period is over?
Yeah,
Because,
it's out. It's at the sort of beginning of the cycle is when it's
yep,
happening the most. And then,
yep. And that's when estrogen is the lowest.
right. And then, man, I don't find that I do it often in interviews, which is great. I'm so thankful. My brain just like doesn't pay attention to my hormone levels when I'm doing interviews, but I'll get off an interview and be like, honey, can you go get me that thing, the thing on the thing over there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah.
but I do it less and less because I have been balancing my hormones, more and more, especially, just the healthier I get.
That's great.
This whole,
That's great.
since starting the podcast, I've lost, close to 70 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
I've
Good for
told
you.
my
That's
story
amazing.
many times, but basically
Yeah.
I had, chronic adrenal fatigue, type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and infertility and
Right.
chronic infections,
Right.
all through my 20s and, into the early parts of my 30s, and then I found found natural medicine and started shopping the perimeter of
On
the
the corner
store.
one day, I was
Yeah,
walking down the street and I
right.
bumped right into natural
Yes,
medicine.
exactly.
Yeah.
And she said, shop the perimeter of
Yeah.
the store and stop eating crap food. And so yeah, we ended up, seeing naturopaths and getting on this bandwagon, and one thing led to another, and my diabetes went away. My polycystic ovarian syndrome slowly got better. Everyone I talk
Yeah.
to says, well, my doctor says I'm going to have it for life. I'm like, yeah, my doctor said I was going to have it for life too. But you know what? I was seeing an MD, not an ND. And if you see an
Yeah.
ND and you see a good ND, they're going to say, well, let's see how much you can heal. Let's just get your body as healthy as it can. So all those problems I had are gone. We conceived our son naturally. I was told by an endocrinologist I'd never have kids.
Oh,
And it was all
I
natural.
hate when I hear that. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's so awful.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yep.
So it was, it's been, for me, I've been doing this, investing in my health for 10 years. I'm about to be 40, and I feel healthier and younger than I did 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
it's
That's
worth it.
amazing.
It's
That's
worth
totally
eating healthy
amazing.
and taking
Yeah.
supplements when needed and making lifestyle changes and doing all the things we learned from guests like you. It's worth it because 10 years from now, you're going to
Yeah.
feel younger than you do now.
That's awesome. That's so great. And it's really, it's really about learning and empowering yourself to take care of yourself and not putting, you're giving your power away to a medical intervention and something that I can't believe hasn't even come up yet when I was talking about estrogen and progesterone balance and the importance of those. And certainly any woman who has been diagnosed with PCOS, it's like, okay, you have all these problems. What's the solution from the mainstream medical model is to put you on the birth control pill.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that do but suppress all your hormone levels? So there's a very, very strong connection in the literature actually about longevity and anti-aging and all of that. And, women are on the pill for 20, 30 years sometimes. It's unreal.
Mm-hmm.
It's unreal. And this is just considered, normal way to manage your symptoms. But what you're doing is you're shutting down that entire endocrine system, that entire symphony of your hormones. And that's going to have a huge effect on almost every body system, so I'm so happy to hear that you were, aware enough to take your health into your own hands and really heal. And yeah, part of
Yes.
a naturopath's training is, the patient is part of the journey as we said earlier, but also just, that we learn from our patients and that we need to empower them to take care of their health. And that's really amazing. I can't believe you lost 75 pounds. That's radical, Ashley. That's so radical. And you have how many children? You have
One
one.
amazing son.
How old
We
is
might
he?
have another one. We're just, he's 4.5 years old,
Yeah,
and
you're not even 40.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
is absolutely the light of our life, and it
Aw.
was a very healthy. It was a very healthy baby. Everything was great. It's just our focus is on supporting the body's ability to maintain health and do
Yeah.
that through food. It's funny that we have this really interesting concept in modern day society where we don't see a connection between what we put in our mouth and the cells that we grow.
Mm.
We're literally made of food. We
Yeah.
started out as this 8-pound baby and we just ate and ate and ate and grew. But now as adults, we just go eat whatever we want. We eat the standard American diet and we don't see that there's any consequence to what we put in our mouth because we have this false belief that everything is safe. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, why would they shouldn't produce things that aren't safe.
Yeah. I just heard, do you know who Dr. Peter Osborne is? He's done a lot of work with gluten sensitivity and celiac disease. And
Mm.
I just listened to a friend of mine's podcast, excellent podcast. Um, and he had Peter Osborne on and was talking about the history of enriched grains in this country and how cereals became this huge part of our diet and how they were never really meant to be used in such high quantities. But of course, because of, monocrops and monoculture agriculture, and the way that it's presented to us, like I never really had made this connection before. I don't know if you have, Ashley, but like when you buy a loaf of regular bread, which you probably don't, I probably don't. I don't usually buy regular bread, but it's like it will say enriched with B vitamins, thiamine, etc. And that's because the grains are not naturally nutritious enough. It's not because these processes took them out. It's like cereals and grains really, we need to be eating way more vegetables, way more whole foods, and if you do eat animal products from healthy raised animals, not, fed antibiotics and corn from the time they were born just to be, slaughtered. So that is definitely not a healthy form of meat consumption. And talk about endocrine disruption. I mean, the amount of hormones that you're exposed to in commercially raised meat products and dairy is way beyond, what you'd ever get in just exposures of lesser intensity. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the whole role of food in our health is just not acknowledged by medicine, which is crazy, right? I mean, it's just crazy that doctors literally tell people your diet doesn't have anything to do with your digestive problems, not to mention your hormone problems, which
Right.
it does.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
so in reversing type 2 diabetes, which was the first thing I reversed was my chronic monthly infections. Every month I was on antibiotics. And when we
Mm,
started, the first change we made after watching, it was like Forks Over Knives, or it was one of those, like, it was in 2008, and it was one of the first health documentaries that Netflix ever streamed. It was streaming was like brand new.
right.
And so I think it was Forks Over Knives or it was Food Inc. It was one of those two. I remember I think we saw Food Inc. in the
Oh
movie
yeah.
theaters. But anyways,
Yeah.
back then we saw both of them, and between 2008 and 2009, and they said vote with your fork, and I was like,
Mm,
yes, vote with your fork. Like if you don't like something in the industry, like don't put money into something you don't like, and put money into things you do like. So buy organic if you want to support organic. And then they said shop the perimeter of the store. And I thought, okay, we're going to give it a shot. And that month, my infections went away. And I thought,
wow.
man, if I could, I just made one change. And what else can I change? And I,
Right.
and I, I gave my body over to the MD, and they
Mm,
just kept giving me drug after drug after drug and never
right.
telling me that I could stop the infections by not eating crap food. I mean,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I wasn't sitting there with a bunch of, like, I don't know, Oreos and Lucky Charms or whatever. Like and Twinkies. I wasn't sitting there like with, I don't know,
Right.
Halloween candy like every day. I was just eating how everyone else ate. I was just
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that was enough to make my body unable to handle
Totally.
infections. And so after that, then I reversed my type 2 diabetes, and I did it totally with food.
That's amazing. And I'm sure all those antibiotics, right, that you had taken,
Mm-hmm.
that just makes you overgrow yeast. And then if you're sensitive to yeast, then forget it. You're going to just get inflammatory process after inflammatory process all over your body.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then having to fight yeast infections and urinary tract infections at the same time. And then that made me want to go look, well, what can I do naturally? Because I didn't want to have to keep going over and over and over again to get an antibiotic for this, what seemed like that was a wake up call for me when I saw, my vagina's out of balance. What's going on? And my vulva and vagina right now, knowing that there's both those, we should really address the whole thing. But
totally.
and we've had people in the Facebook group, in the Learn Child Facebook group, not people, we've had women talk about that they have yeast infections and UTIs and what to do about it, and there's so much great holistic information out there. So I definitely want to get into how we can create a healthier relationship with our vagina and vulva, because you have such a great course that you created talking about microbiome and what we can do on a natural level. But the reason why I shared my story is to illustrate that something as simple as food can really shift our health hugely.
Yeah.
And that traditional doctors, like when I say traditional, I mean MDs who go to medical school, wonderful people, best of intentions. They're great to go to when you need a drug or you need a surgery or procedure, but they don't have any training in how to use diet to heal the body. And so oftentimes we're going to the wrong doctor. Going to a naturopath to help us heal the body is the right doctor to go to. So there's my little soapbox. I'm getting off of it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate people like you so much that have really taken it to a wider audience. It's not just naturopaths talking to other naturopaths and our patients. It really is a much bigger platform that you've helped create, Ashley. So I think that's great. We need to hear from more people outside of the profession about what naturopathic medicine can do for them. So thank you for the support.
Absolutely. I'm the biggest cheerleader, biggest fan of naturopaths you'll ever have. Can you tell us, in your experience working clinically, helping women to balance their hormones, what kind of diet changes have you helped women make that then you've seen in the blood work that their hormones became into healthier levels because of those diet changes?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, hormones that we've talked about so far, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, are all the reproductive hormones. Of course, we've got the stress hormones, cortisol, DHEA, et cetera. And then the hormones that food affects first and foremost, of course, is insulin and, some of the pancreatic secretions that are immediately affected by your diet. And this is why I'm sure, Ashley, part of your journey in healing yourself of PCOS had to do with your insulin levels. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the term insulin resistance, but a lot of my dietary recommendations come from one of my main teachers, which is Dr. Peter Diadamo, who is the doctor of blood type diet fame. And I know you are familiar with his work as well. And lately I've been thinking a lot more about Peter's work because, there's this anti-lectin diet that's like kind of out there in the world now, and it just drives me a little batty because the whole point of lectins is that some of them that they're choosy. So some of them are actually beneficial lectins, some of them are negative lectins, and depending on what your blood type is, means that there are certain lectins in foods, which are basically sugar-loving proteins that can attach to your blood type antigen, which is a sugar. And depending on your blood type antigen, different lectins can have different effects in your body. Now, this is not like the be all end all everything. Some people have dramatic, profound changes just from following a blood type diet. And then other people need more tweaking and more finesse. But the blood type is always someplace that I start because it does mean a tremendous amount about who you are as a biochemical individual to know if you're blood type O, blood type A, blood type B, or AB. And that's always where I'm going to start with diet. Even if I don't give somebody, I use Dr. Diadamo's software, the Swami genotyping diet software for people. But if in the beginning, when I'm working with people, men and women, and I'm trying to address dietary issues, I may just make some broad stroke recommendations. And I always start out with some of the very, fundamentals of the blood type diet approach. And I have just seen clinically over 20 years a tremendous amount of consistency with people who are blood type A cannot really digest red meat as well as people who are blood type O or B. And so that might be just one thing I start with, and it's amazing. And maybe you've heard this a lot yourself, because I know you've talked to a lot of people. It's amazing how a lot of times people will say intuitively that they feel better when they're eating more according to their blood type. So that's always sort of the starting point or the jumping off point. So when it comes to hormones, one of the things that's important in terms of hormonal imbalances is whether your gut is clearing the hormones properly.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's, phase 3 detoxification of all of our hormones. So, starting with gut health is always a really common place. And what's one of the things that you do several times a day as a therapy for your gut is eat food. So food can be medicine, food can be therapy. So it's not like I'm specifically saying, oh, eat this food, which is good for your hormones. But obviously, we want to minimize the amount of inflammation in the gut. We want to minimize any food sensitivity reactions. We want to minimize the destruction of the gut lining, which lectins also play a role in the health of the microvilli in the small intestine, which is where, all your nutrients are absorbed. So that's always the jumping off point. So the real sort of like 30-second breakdown is type O's tend to be more carnivorous. Type A's tend to do better with less animal proteins in their diet. And type B's are what we call idiosyncratic omnivores. So there's some idiosyncratic lectin relationships. And then I'm always interested in looking at someone's metabolic type layered on top of the blood type. So for someone, if I can use you as an example, Ashley, I don't know what your blood type is, but if you've got PCOS, you've definitely got some thrifty metabolic tendencies, meaning when your body is restricted from calories, or if it's eating a lot of empty calories, refined sugars and refined carbohydrates, it's going to sock those calories away as fat for future times of deprivation. So if you're not giving your body good nutrient-dense foods, if you have a thrifty metabolic type, you're actually going to have a very, very hard time starving yourself into losing weight. And you're going to feel like crap. You're going to be irritable. You're going to be hangry. You're going to be, your hormones are going to be completely imbalanced. Your moods can be affected, et cetera. So it's really important to understand if somebody has that sort of thrifty metabolic type to find the foods that are going to, stoke the digestive fires and be healthy sources of calories and nutrients for that person. So depending on whether you're a type O with a thrifty metabolic type or a type A with a thrifty metabolic type layered on top, I would make different kinds of food recommendations. One thing I can say across the board, which I think you probably already know, and hopefully a lot of your listeners already know, is that the amount of whole foods, meaning vegetables and fruits and, those types of high fiber foods are going to be excellent for keeping your hormones balanced, because the fibers really feed the beneficial bacteria that help your body eliminate excess inflammatory estrogens and some of the excess, toxins that are in your system that might be having that feedback onto your hormonal balance as well. So high fiber is just sort of like a general statement that I can make across the board that's beneficial for both gut health and inflammation, and therefore hormonal health. And then also foods that are really beneficial to feed the beneficial bacteria. So there's a lot of, types of probiotic supplementation out there that some of those things have the prebiotic fibers in them, and healthy fibers. And then there's things like lard, arabinogalactin, and supplements. But some of those things can actually just amplify the effects of a healthy diet. So you've always got to address the diet and the gut health, no matter what the imbalance or chronic problem is.
How much fiber is a good, I mean, not like I'm sitting there with Metamucil or flax going, well, I got to put another 5 tablespoons, not like that. But like if we were to eat a pound,
5 cups,
5 cups of vegetables a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or fruits, because fruits are high in fiber as well. I mean, blueberries are, ounce for ounce, one of the highest fiber foods there are. So, that's a good rule of thumb, is like 5 cups. And, I, over the summer, I lost some weight myself. I was like, I'm perimenopausal, as I mentioned earlier. I'm still cycling, but I had kind of put on 10 pounds without really knowing it. And then I stepped on the scale and I was like, oh, that's interesting. My pants feel a little different. So I did actually start to measure out some of my food just for a short period of time so I could really get an eyeball. And it's amazing. If you start eating like 5 cups of vegetables and or fruits per day, your elimination system is going to definitely improve, unless you're eating a ton of processed refined flour products, which can certainly slow down the bowel movements and create more irritated mucus, which can then give you some digestive problems. But if you just simply add in foods, and I really like to do that as well with my patient base, because I like to focus on the things that are beneficial and use food as medicine, rather than having people focus on a restrictive mindset all the time. So if you just naturally start adding in, 5 cups of veggies, that is going to be so much more filling that you're just not going to eat as much of the processed refined foods. So that's a good, sort of blanket statement that I can make, because, really all the dietary advice I give is pretty highly individualized.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is
Right.
going to have a totally different diet than someone who has
to cook their
GERD.
vegetables.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Another cool little dietary thing, though, before we leave that topic, there is a great carrot salad recipe that I've recommended to a lot of women. And if you just grate some organic carrots, of course, they can be heirloom, they can be the regular orange ones, whatever you like, but a grated carrot with a little tiny bit of lemon juice, a little bit of olive oil, sea salt, or if you do apple cider vinegar in small amounts, or even some of the other vinegars, that can be really excellent for helping balance your estrogens. So that's a little food thing that almost everyone can tolerate. Carrots. I haven't met too many patients that are sensitive to carrots. So generally that's a rule.
Why is a carrot salad good for balancing hormones?
It has a certain amount of fiber in it, and it feeds some of those beneficial bacteria, and it has an effect on the calcium D-glucarate in the gut, which helps your body eliminate inflammatory estrogens. Isn't that cool?
Yes, it's very cool. Before we move on to the vaginal health, I definitely want to get to that. So you mentioned gut clearing hormones being phase 3. For those who don't know, can you just explain what that is? Because we hear that high estrogen's really bad for us, right? But we don't know the difference between the estrogen the body makes, the estrogen the body wants to eliminate.
Right. Perfect. So there's kind of 3 different major metabolic pathways or clearance, if you will. It's what happens in your liver to your hormones to help your hormones break down and be eliminated from your body. So phase 1 is the first phase of that process. Phase 2, and I don't need to go into a big biochemistry lecture, but basically your liver has to go through phase 1, phase 2, and then it kicks it into the gut, because the blood that circulates from the liver gets emptied into your gut, and then it's phase 3 elimination or detoxification is what is related to the health of your microbiome and actually getting those hormone byproducts into your stool so that you can eliminate them. And, some of the hormone testing that I use is a urinary metabolite testing, and we can actually see how well those liver enzymes are doing in terms of eliminating the various estrogens and which pathway they're going down. Because if you've got a high, what's called 4-hydroxy pathway, if you've got a lot of the estrogens going down that pathway, you're going to be a lot more symptomatic. The 16 pathway also gives you a lot of symptoms of like PMS and bloating and the like discomfort that a lot of women feel prior to their period. And then the 4 pathway is the one that really is more inflammatory and does damage to the DNA. So it's sort of like the precancerous pathway. And then the 2 pathway is the pathway that you would like to see preferentially in a woman. And so we can do hormone testing through urine metabolites, as I said, and we can see, is your body doing a good job of eliminating these estrogens? Because as we have said from the beginning of this conversation, we don't want to just have low estrogen. Like, that's not good. Estrogen is really important. And it's especially important after we, go through menopause, because it is an anti-aging type of hormone in our bodies. But of course, we don't want the type of estrogen that's going to lead to a breast cancer or another type of overgrowth of the cells in an unhealthy way, where the DNA is damaged and you're more likely to have a cancer formation.
Got it. So once the body's done with the estrogen, we need to clear it out. And
right, that's phase 3.
Right. And what I hear is that when we have constipation, for example, or we're just not having enough healthy bowel movements in the day, that the gut reabsorbs and can actually reactivate the estrogen. And so we can become estrogen dominant because of our gut health, because of poor gut health.
Yes, we can recirculate those estrogens. And if you're taking hormone replacement, even bioidentical hormones, they can be, problematic in terms of the recirculation. And you can get elevated levels of certain hormones if you're not moving your bowels on a regular basis. Absolutely. Hugely important topic of, healthy bowel movements. I talk to people about poop every day. It's like, hi, nice to meet you. Please take off most of your clothes so I can do a whole body thermography scan. And now we're going to talk about your poop, so it's like people have to get real comfortable real quick. But yeah,
I bet.
And actually, the health of the vaginal microbiome is related to this too. And I think it's really fascinating that the vagina, which is designed to, have something come in it from the outside, it's an area that's exposed, it's mucosal membranes that are exposed to the outside world. It doesn't have the diversity that the gut microbiome has. You actually don't want a great diversity of flora in the vaginal tissue as you do in the gut. So, the effects of antibiotics or the effects of the birth control pill or a number of other drugs, even the effects of PPIs and other things that are used to manage digestive symptoms, can have a huge effect on not just the microbiome of your gut, but the vaginal microbiome as well. And you can get a lot of problems with overgrowth in both systems, and you kind of need to address them differently. So
how do we address yeast infections, or, that would be the overgrowth, right? Is it, we call it a yeast infection?
Well, it depends, because you can get overgrowth of other things too. So yeast is probably one of the most common, organisms that we see overgrowing. And not only that, Ashley, it doesn't always, again, it's like, I wish everything was a little bit more simple, but it's not. Sometimes for a lot of women, it's not a matter of how much yeast they actually have in their bodies. And by the way, type O's definitely have a higher, what's called candida carriage. We just have higher levels of yeast because blood type O antigen is a preferred food source for candida and other yeast. So type O's might have higher levels of yeast, but it's also a matter of how sensitive the person is to the yeast in their system. And this is going down a little bit of a tangent, and I'll get back to answering your
I
question.
love this tangent. Keep going.
But that's one of the things that I'm working with these new therapies in the office that I'm working in Fairfield, Connecticut now, which is called Fairfield Family Health, is doing LDA and LDI therapy. I don't know if you're familiar with these, but they are therapies that have been around basically since the 1950s and have grown in popularity recently, although they're still pretty new to the world of natural medicine. And they were created by medical doctors. And what it is it's immune desensitization or immune tolerance to various substances. So you can do the treatment LDA for like environmental sensitivities, for food sensitivities, and you give a very, very small dose. And this is why it just made so much sense to me once I started familiarizing myself with this and being educated. And now I've, listened to a tremendous amount of information. And I'm actually going to my first conference about this on October 9th. Anyway, it just makes so much sense because it's not a matter of, having an infection or having like toxins in your system that you can't get rid of because you're so overwhelmed with the environmental toxins or the food toxins. It's more a matter of your immune system getting caught in this vicious cycle of reacting to something. And this is where something like LDA can be really helpful because it gives you infinitesimal doses, like homeopathic doses essentially, of these substances that give your body a tolerance to various substances. So like I said, the LDA is more for the environmental and the food sensitivities, but the LDI is really the outgrowth from Dr. Ty Vincent of LDA therapy, and he's termed it low-dose immunotherapy, and that's using much more specific pathogens. And so I've used candida and yeast, and also I treat a tremendous amount of Lyme disease and co-infections, and there's an entire Lyme mix. So you can use these specific pathogens to break that cycle of sensitivity. So it's not like you're using oregano oil or boric acid or diatomaceous earth or all these things that can kill yeast. You're using something that actually helps your immune system become more tolerant to this thing that's in our bodies. I mean, we all have yeast in our systems, it's just a matter of, have we been on antibiotics 10 times in the last 10 years? Do we have this incredible overgrowth, or do we just have a certain sensitivity to the yeast, and that's really what's driving all of our symptoms?
Got it. So if someone doesn't have a massive overgrowth, but their immune system is mounting this massive response to a small amount of yeast, which naturally occurs in all of us, then it's more about dealing with an allergy.
Exactly. And you can even use, it gets really deep. It's a beautiful approach, really. And I love that Dr. Vincent is totally transparent about how we really don't know, like the science is not, it's just not there. The research has not been done. There's been advances in this type of therapy, but we really don't know. We think we understand. What's happening is that the substance that's administered in this very, very small amount is upregulating the T lymphocytes and giving your immune system a chance to recognize, if you will, that this is something that it doesn't need to go crazy and attack. So it's giving you that tolerance, or, desensitizing your system to this particular substance. One of the things that I'm really excited about treating using this therapy is Hashimoto's thyroid, because there's a pretty strong case in the literature for a pathogen called Yersinia to be the trigger for this autoimmune thyroid disease. And we can use LDI to, again, create a situation in the body where it's not making the antibodies. And you can see this with follow-ups, with blood tests for antibody levels. You can see it with yeast. You can see it with with Hashimoto's, the ATA and the TPO antibodies. You can see it with all the Lyme pathogens and Babesia and Bartonella. And I've also been starting to treat some women with herpes simplex virus that have had outbreaks of herpes for many years. So when you know what the offending trigger, what the pathogen is that might be involved in any of these processes, and certainly in terms of vaginal health and yeast overgrowth, you can absolutely use this type of therapy to desensitize the person to the yeast that is present. And then you may also want to do some yeast killing. It depends, that's based on clinical context of, did they get a wet prep and the gynecologist said, yes, there's a tremendous amount of yeast, or there's BV, or there's, other organisms, or there's just a lot of white blood cells, which means it's an immune mediated inflammation. And that can happen with chronic UTIs as well. So that's another thing that a lot of women struggle with, these chronic UTIs. And then the more antibiotics they get put on, what's going to happen? They're just going to develop more candida overgrowth. And then that could potentially stimulate an inflammatory process. So there's a lot of creative ways to address this. And I just love the idea of supporting the immune system, because that to me is, true naturopathic medicine. That's what we learned in school, and what I was definitely reinforced with by Dr. Gagnon, my main homeopathic teacher, was that, we're not born with this specific immune system. We have to learn as babies, what is self first. We have to recognize what our self tissues look like and antigens look like. And then we have to learn, our immune system has to learn specific defenses. So some of this process, this immunological process, gets really confused. And that's why there's so much autoimmune disease, because again, we've destroyed our microbiomes. We've been exposed to all these toxins. We've been exposed to all these antigens, and climate change has encouraged the, rampant spread of, tick-borne diseases and mosquito-borne diseases and all of that. So, as a population, we're really dealing with a lot more chronic pathogens. But even once we've cleared the infection stage, we may still have this immune process that's continuing like a vicious cycle. So it's a really exciting time for me personally as a doctor, because I've for many years used a number of complex homeopathics to support the non-specific aspect of the immune system. So supporting, and with nutrients and with diet as well. But I've done a lot with supporting the non-specific aspects of inflammation and histamine reactions and cytokines and all those kinds of things. And now I'm starting to use more of the specific antigens with it. And it's really been cool. I'm seeing some really great results already.
Very
so it's
cool.
Exciting.
Yeah. You mentioned all the things that have caused our immune system to kind of go haywire in the last 30 years. What about vaccines? Now, by 2015, by the age of 6, children would receive 49 doses of vaccines by the age 6. And a total of about 70 doses of vaccines are recommended by the time they're 21 or something like that. Whereas when I was a child, it was maybe 16.
Wow. Yeah. You're going to drag me into the vaccine conversation.
No, I don't. I mean, I don't want to because that's a whole episode onto itself.
Sure
but do you think
many
that
episodes.
many episodes we could spend on that. But do you see? I mean, could you add that to the list of the things that are causing our immune system to not really understand how to deal with stuff? Like, why is the autoimmune in the last 40 years has skyrocketed?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really the main thrust of what Dr. Gagnon taught me, right when I graduated from naturopathic medical school all the way back in 1998. My friend and I flew to New York, and this French medical doctor came over and just kind of blew our minds. And that was the main thing that he would say. It's not that vaccines cause autism or vaccines cause, diarrhea or whatever. It's that they, when they're administered in such high amounts, they can overwhelm in certain individuals, they can overwhelm the immune system, and it causes this perturbation in that natural process of what I just said, the body's ability, the baby's ability really, to recognize self from non-self. That's a lot of information you're putting into a little child, right? About from the outside, not just the pathogens, but all of the, adjuvant ingredients and yada, yada, yada. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole. I'm sure you know a lot about it. I'm sure your listeners know a lot about it. And unfortunately, it's become this insanely polarizing issue in our society, and nobody can really even talk to each other about it. It's really bad.
I've got a great interview that's very balanced because people really want to get polarized. People really want to be for or against them. But I have a wonderful interview that feels very balanced, that honors both sides. And I'll make sure I link it in the show notes. And he's a pediatrician who has a very, very busy practice in Portland. I think he has like 3 or 4 other pediatricians and a naturopath, MDs and a naturopath and a bunch of nurses all working with him. So they have tens of thousands of patients. And in his many years of working there, he has not had one case of full-blown autism, because what he says is that he does an altered schedule. About 50% of his patients choose not to vaccinate because they are attracted to him because he believes in informed consent.
Right.
And then he has the other 50% choose to do altered schedule. So 1 dose at a time. They come in for 1 and then they monitor and see how the child is. And so he has a very different altered schedule for those who choose to vaccinate. And he wrote a book on it. I think it's called like Safe Vaccines or something like that. And the second they see a regression in the child or any kind of reaction, they stop 100% stop vaccines and that's it. There's no, this child is not a candidate for them. And that's how he prevents having vaccine injury in his clinic, because before he started his clinic many years ago, he worked as an early pediatrician. He was in a clinic where when children were like talking or walking and then they had their vaccine doses and they stopped talking and walking, it was encouraged to keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep giving them doses, keep going. And he felt so bad because he felt as though he was part of basically causing vaccine injury in children. He would see it and he would argue with the other doctors in the clinic. And because he was such a new doctor, they were like, who are you? Don't question big pharma. Don't question anything. Keep going. And so he made it his mission to look into this. And so anyway, his whole thing is, if you're going to do vaccines, here's the safest way to do it based on his incredible amount of clinical experience.
Oh, that's great.
But I love what you said about that from birth we're putting in this foreign antigens and foreign stuff in the baby, and the immune system hasn't even had a chance to learn who is self and who's not self.
Yeah. So the only defense that we have, right? Dr. Guignol used to say it forces the immune system to try and create these specific antibodies before it's really mature enough to do so. And that's why, for me personally, like with my son, once he was 7, which is when, naturally our bodies are able to form specific antibodies, I felt a lot more comfortable thinking about the vaccine question. Before he was 7, you really only have the non-specific immune defense, which is inflammation and fever. And that's why so many people, see their children get these incredible inflammatory conditions and of course, fevers after vaccinations. Yeah. Not to mention what it's doing to the microbiome and, all of that.
Yeah.
All of that.
So I didn't mean to go there, but you brought, I had to, we had to cover that.
Totally. And it's just, it's just one of those things that I don't like to post on social media about it, because you just you can't question anything without being accused of being this rabid, anti-science, anti-vaxxer, like crazy person. And
Right.
it's awful that that's where we're at.
Well,
It's really
that
awful.
is the problem, is that they're using a straw man and a red herring, these linguistic fallacies, to throw us off our game.
Right.
So that's the problem, is that we need to sit down and have an educated discussion about everything so that we can make a better future for ourselves and for our
Right.
children. But because they want us fighting against each other, because then we don't, if we're fighting amongst ourselves, we don't rise up to make them change things.
Mm,
We're fighting amongst ourselves, and then
yeah.
we're questioned as being, like you said, anti-science or whatever, right? So but I'm not either side. I'm pro kid and pro health. So
Exactly.
let's just
Yeah,
focus on
totally.
supporting our body's ability to heal itself. I really want to make sure we cover it. You created a course. Now, is this course available to
No, it was actually
purchase?
just like a little, we just, Dr. Nayak and I just decided we were going to just do a little like, hey, like, let's just see, how this goes in terms of like just giving women some information. I mean, we have a Facebook group, we share a ton of content for free. I mean, it's just part of like building our tribe, helping empower women. There's always those women that will need more specific support, and we're happy to have new patients from that community. But really, at this point, I am just committed to sharing this information as much as possible. So we created this little mini course, and we did our first one on vaginal health, and we want to do another one on breast health coming up. So
Mm.
just get on our lists and you'll find out about it. Go to our feminology.org site and just sign up for any one of our free downloads, and you'll be on our email list. And we don't email more than, I would say once a month, which all of the marketing people say, oh no, you got to email every week. But don't worry, we're not going to clog up your inbox with tons of emails. But yeah, we did this course on the vaginal and vulvar health, just because, as we said earlier, it's an area of the body that, a lot of women are Googling about, and they're not actually talking to their doctors or talking to other women, because it's an area that a lot of women have a lot of shame around, which is really sad.
Mm.
But it's the truth. I mean, we live in a patriarchal society, and it's kind of interesting that we do refer to the area as our vagina, because the vagina, as I mentioned earlier, is really just the canal that is penetrated in sexual intercourse. So it's not, if you're having sex with a man, but it's not,
It's not the fun
uh,
part.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So, so even the way we speak about it and talk about it is informed by our culture. But we wanted to do this because a lot of women do have vaginitis, and we've certainly talked about yeast vaginitis, and certain natural supplements can be beneficial, and sometimes the over-the-counter stuff is fine. And, it's not like you have to see a naturopath if you have, a single yeast infection. But if you're getting yeast infection after yeast infection and you can't clear them, and, you've got other problems, vulvodynia developing, which is painful sex in the vulvar area, which is, again, another thing that a lot of women struggle with, then yeah, you probably need some more focused support. And then, of course, if you've had imbalances in the vaginal flora, this can lead to a more, prone situation to develop bacterial vaginosis, and an imbalance in the flora, can lead to symptoms, of discharge, and discharge is normal for women. Vaginal discharge at different points in the month, you obviously discharge more when you're ovulating, and there's that cervical mucus. But discharge that's painful or irritating, or discharge that's itchy or causing itching in the vulvar area, then you may want to get checked out. Or discharge that smells a little off. So all of these things can be addressed, certainly with natural medicine. I've had some funny kind of home remedies that are totally safe. One of the things that I love to recommend to women that they can do, especially women if you've had any kind of really like chronic yeast can cause almost even fissures where the tissue is actually splitting.
Oh my
And that can
gosh.
be tremendously painful.
Mm,
And one of the best things that I've found that's readily available and inexpensive is ghee, clarified butter.
really?
Yeah, so ghee is super duper rich in butyric acid. That's where butter gets its name from. And, butyric acid is used as enemas in, ulcerative colitis. I mean, butyric acid has an amazing ability to heal up the mucosa of both the gut and the vaginal tissue and the vulvar tissue. And it's totally safe and it smells nice. So you can actually use ghee topically. I know some women that have used coconut butter or coconut oil. I just tend to like the medicinal aspect of the ghee a little bit more. And then there's some other, things that I've recommended, like pomegranate oil is an amazing, safe, and natural constituent of some of the, I actually use a particular brand of products that I love that are formulated by a friend of mine, and they're called Curious Intimacy. And she makes some beautiful products that are all natural, all organic. And one of them in particular has a good amount of pomegranate oil in it. And that's long been known to have these potent antioxidant effects, but it also reduces tumor necrosis factor activity. So tumor necrosis factor is a molecule that will damage, again, epithelial cells throughout the body. So in the lining of the gut and the vaginal tract as well. So it's going to reduce inflammation that causes damage to the epithelial cells. So, you probably aren't going to get the same effect from drinking pomegranate juice, although pomegranate juice is also very medicinal as well. It feeds actually a really beneficial bacteria in the gut. So pomegranates are wonderful foods for a variety of women's health conditions, but the oil in particular, I really like to use for vaginal health.
Topically.
Yeah, topically. Yeah,
Got it.
topically. And then one of the other things that I like to do topically is cumin seed oil. And if you do get it's found as an essential oil, and I believe if you put just like one or two drops into a carrier oil like almond oil or even ghee or pomegranate oil, if you get some pomegranate oil, that can be really, really beneficial as an anti-yeast, as is oregano. So oregano, people take oral encapsulated oregano oil, which is wonderful for infections and yeast. So that's another thing that I've recommended to women. But if you get the essential oil, just be sure you don't put straight oregano oil or cumin seed
Oh,
oil on
oh,
the vaginal tissue. Yeah,
no.
you
Oh,
absolutely have to have a carrier oil. So that's something that I've recommended to women as well. And it's great because, a little thing of essential oils lasts a long time. You only need one or two drops.
mm-hmm.
It's not a drug, it's not a pharmaceutical, and it's not going to have any other side effects that, some of the medicines that are used to treat yeast, like diflucan, which is, a very common prescription from your gynecologist. If you've got a yeast infection, take one or two doses of diflucan. That just puts a little bit of stress on your liver. And, if you don't need to do that, I'm sure there's lots of listeners who would rather just try something natural. Um,
Absolutely. And then there's
yeah.
more studies that are coming out there showing that there's several antibiotics that inhibit the body from producing collagen, and that later on they're seeing that aortic aneurysms and things like the Achilles tendon erupting.
Oh, you've hit on one of my favorite topics, which is the fluoroquinones. I myself okay, so here's a little story about Dr. Ginger. I was training for a half marathon, and I was a chronic UTI sufferer for many years. I had interstitial cystitis. I cured myself of interstitial cystitis, but it's just one of my weak spots. I tend to get bladder infections. So I'm training for this half marathon, and it's during the summer that I'm training, and I get totally dehydrated. It was a really hot summer. This is a few years ago, a number of years ago, actually, like 8. Anyway, I get a UTI. And I do all of my usual stuff, and it's just not working. I can't keep up, and I can feel it sort of. I've had 2 kidney infections as well.
Ooh.
So I can feel it kind of traveling to my kidney. And I've been training for this race for several months, and I really don't want to miss this race because because I have a UTI or it's going to my kidney. Because you feel really crappy when you have a kidney infection. You get a fever and it's very serious. You need antibiotics immediately. So I call my medical doctor friend and I say, can you call me in a script for an antibiotic? I have a kidney infection. I mean, I have a bladder infection that I'm afraid is traveling to my kidney. So he's a surgeon, and it was a bad idea. I mean, he was being nice and doing me a favor, but this is a lesson in like, go to your regular doctors that take care of you and get prescriptions from people that know your comprehensive health history. So he called in a script for Cipro. So I didn't want to bother him and call him back. He's a really busy surgeon. So I took the Cipro and I ran the half marathon, and I can't believe I didn't blow out my Achilles, but I developed tendonitis in every major tendon in my body. And I broke out in hives all over my back, all over my chest. I remember I was caught in traffic on 95. For those of you that live on the East Coast, 95 is, 95's middle name is traffic. So, I was caught in traffic, and I'm looking in the rear view mirror and I'm like, my face looks kind of weird and I'm kind of itchy. And I looked at my neck and I had hives on my neck, hives on my back, hives all over my torso. And, of course, my doctor wanted to put me on steroids. I was like, no way, I'm not going on steroids. So I developed this Cipro reaction, and I'm sure it was because I stressed my body running the 13 miles and had been taking this medication, which you are exactly right. It upsets the collagen. It actually disrupts the DNA, and it can cause permanent disability in various connective tissues in the body. And that's why the aortic aneurysm thing is coming to light. Those drugs are bad news, and they should really be, I would be willing to bet they're going to get pulled from the market. So I really strongly recommend, if you have a UTI, if you need some antibiotics, get some Bactrim, get some, milder antibiotics, macrobid, et cetera. Stay away from those fluoroquinones. They're really, really hellacious, and some people have had permanent disability from them. I feel like I managed over time to get over the tendonitis, but I got a tremendous amount of neuromuscular work and body work, and I was taking a tremendous amount of natural anti-inflammatories, and it took me a long time, and I still have, it's not my Achilles, but on the lower right limb, I have a tendon on the outside of my leg. I think it's my peroneal tendon or something like that, a not perineal, because that's your perianus muscles, but the peroneus muscle, which is a postural muscle that has a tendon, still bothers me like on a daily basis. So those drugs are super duper scary, and a lot of people have reactions to them.
We have to remember that every drug that's been taken off the market for killing people was first approved safe.
Scary, right?
So when we come back to that vaccine argument, everyone's yelling, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. We have to remember every single drug that's been taken off the market for killing and maiming people was first absolutely 100% stamped safe. So we need to have a little bit of paranoia to survive in this world, right? We need to question everything, do our research. Be willing to go get a second opinion or a third opinion by different kinds of doctors. Be willing to take in different information and weigh the pros and cons, and not just, go with the flow. And I like saying this in the show. If you want to be a statistic, if you want to be the 1 in 3 people that dies of cancer or 1 in 3 people dies of heart disease, 1 in 3 people that has diabetes or pre-diabetes or is obese, if you want to be a statistic, then do what everyone else is doing. If you don't want to be a statistic and you want to live to your genetic potential of 120 years old, disease-free and healthy, then you got to go against the grain. We got to be the oddball that says like no to gluten and eats organic and like puts essential oils in our, vulva and vagina, those kind of things. Like we got to be a little bit out there, but we're going to make sure if we're going against the grain that we're not going to be a statistic. Can you share with us what we can do? Let's say now we've recovered from our yeast infection, or from, the everything's back to normal after using the
Hmm.
ghee or using all the wonderful things you mentioned, and we've maybe adjusted our diet, maybe even looked at some emotional work, because I've heard that there's a connection
Oh,
between
yeah.
stress levels, emotional levels, when women feel betrayed by their partner, for example, or when they have an affair and they feel guilty or shameful around it, that there's an increase in UTIs and yeast infections. So looking at emotional state and emotional stress, like the body as a whole, lifestyle as a whole. But once we've come back and we're no longer infected, how can we support the vagina and the vulva to have a healthy microbiome?
Actually, great question. So, first of all, stay away from bleached tampons. Stay away
Mm.
from all the chemicals that are in most of your, run of the mill feminine hygiene products. Investigate using more of the cups if those are comfortable for you. Other types of ways of managing your menstrual blood, or if you don't mind using just pads, use pads. Watch out for sex toys that are made from, inferior quality materials. Latex is a common allergy, but there's definitely, you get what you pay for in terms of anything that you're putting inside your vagina. So
Right.
buy the high end, sex toys. If you're going to go there, it's something to invest in. So that's those are two things. And then, something really simple that gets overlooked too is just staying hydrated, because the vaginal tissue it's a sensitive ecosystem, and when you get dehydrated, there's a really strong correlation for dryness, and when you get dry, you tend to get more tissue damage. And keeping your hormones balanced overall is really, our vaginas are obviously, and our vulvas are obviously connected to our bodies. So an overall approach to your hormone health is definitely going to help the vaginal tissue, help the vulvar tissue, and eating a diet that's anti-inflammatory for you. And some of that I mentioned earlier is pretty individualized, but there's definitely some broad strokes that we've touched upon, and you've touched upon, Ashley, which is great. Hydrogenated fats and refined sugars and refined flours are pretty much bad for everybody. High fructose corn syrup is not going to make your body a happy place, no matter who you are, what your blood type is, what your metabolic type is, no matter what. So yeah, some simple things like diet and hydration, but also just be careful what you put on your body, including your vaginal tissue and your vulvar area. I don't tend to use a lot of products, and certainly recommend to many women not to use soaps. There's been a lot about the Purell and the antibacterial
Oh,
hand sanitizers, right?
no.
Well, this same thing applies to anything vaginally.
Right.
You really don't want to try and kill the good bacteria there. So staying away from harsh chemicals and perfumes and synthetics, on that tissue would be definitely an important thing. And then also, the classic peeing after sex, if you need to wash after sex. Some women I know definitely like to do a little rinse. The products that I mentioned earlier, made by my friend Elizabeth Moriarty, Curious Intimacy, they have a wonderful afterplay product that you can use, which is oils as well, with some essential oils, with some beautiful natural ingredients. So that's definitely a way to be proactive and preventive in terms of getting yeast infections. One of the oils, the afterplay, I believe, has the black cumin seed in it. So, there's a number of things to do just to, keep things healthy and balanced. And a lot of that is just some of your, basic naturopathic recommendations. But
Wonderful.
but definitely tampons. Do not use bleached tampons at all.
What about the
Yeah.
organic? They're white, but they say they're organic. Is that okay? Or are they
Yeah, I
also
mean,
bleached?
they should say whether they're bleached. I think there are some, tampons that are made from organic cotton, but they're still bleached. So I
Mm.
wouldn't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Bleach is definitely going to mess up your microbiome and cause, pain for some women.
What about
Yeah.
douching with yogurt? That's kind of a home remedy I learned from my mom. I mean, I haven't needed to do it,
Yeah.
since I was like a teenager. I think I did it once because my mom was like, "This is what we do." So, is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it douching per se because I think of douching as like a washing, but you could certainly do like a yogurt infusion. And I've actually, like along with the ghee, there's something else that I've recommended to women that I didn't mention already for yeast. I mean, the ghee is more soothing and healing up the irritated mucosal membranes, but for yeast, you can actually nick a little clove of garlic
Mm-hmm.
and insert that too. You definitely want to be aware that it's going to burn for a little bit. So I wouldn't necessarily do it many days in a row. And I'm a little cautious about saying this in a public forum because, I certainly don't want anybody to hurt themselves. But for most women, that can be incredibly soothing and anti-infective as well.
I've totally
Um,
done the garlic thing, and you
yeah.
will smell like garlic. You're gonna walk around being like, I am smelling Italian food all the time. I mean, this was back when I was like a
Yeah,
teenager, but
especially
it
if you've got
worked.
the oregano essential oil and
Right,
the
right.
garlic, it's
Mix
going to
it
be
with the
like a
oregano.
pizza.
That's so funny. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Okay, two more quick things. One,
Yeah.
colloidal silver for the vagina. Would you say, yeah, vagina, right? The canal. Would you say
Yeah.
that that is a good thing to use if we're looking to combat an overgrowth?
Yeah, I've never used colloidal silver. Vaginally. I've used it, in the sinuses and in neti pots and washes, and I've used colloidal silver sprays, and I've used it orally for, viruses and whatnot. I tend to think of the silver as antiviral, so it wouldn't
Oh,
be the first thing I would think of vaginally, but I'm sure it could be beneficial if that's the main issue. I just tend to think of it more as an antiviral than an
got it.
antibacterial or anti-yeast.
And it's less
Yeah.
likely we have a viral infection
Yeah,
down
yeah, it's
there.
less likely. Yeah, and usually if it's a viral thing, it's a herpes virus and it's going to be transmitted through the nerve tissue.
Yeah.
That's why viral infections are so painful because it's affecting the nerves. So, doing something topically in the vaginal canal isn't going to be as effective as
Got
doing
it.
some antivirals that would hit the nerve tissue.
Yeah. Man, I can't wait to have you back on the show. Just keep coming back. You've got so much to
Oh, thank
share.
you,
This is so much
Ashley.
fun.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to make sure all the links to everything that Dr. Ginger Nash does is in the show notes of today's podcast at learntoyourhealth.com, gingernash.com, and feminology.org, and everything else. Your Facebook group. We'll put all that information in the show notes today. To wrap up today's interview, I'd love for you to share some homework. Give us some homework. What do you want us to do? Get us to go out there and do something for our health.
Well, I think that what I mentioned earlier about that 5 cups of vegetables a day, like
Yes.
if you make one change in your diet, just start trying to eat 5 cups of vegetables a day. And that's going to, like I said earlier, fill you up. It's going to automatically decrease the amount of, processed foods you're going to want to eat because those vegetables are, not calorically dense and they're, tremendously beneficial for all the fiber content, all the antioxidant content, all the nutrients, the microminerals. I particularly love to recommend seaweed salad to people because so
Mm.
many people are mineral deficient. And I know you live in Seattle, you have all the good sushi restaurants around you. So, that's a really wonderful source of microminerals. So that would be a good way to go. Get
I
your get
love
your
it.
veggies.
Get your
Yeah.
veggies in. I start my day with 1 pound of steamed vegetables because it's the easiest thing to do. I can throw either fresh or frozen. I can just throw a pound. So that's about 2 cups. And I throw that in the steamer. Well, I have got like this bamboo thing at the Asian market. You get this really cool bamboo steamer and you just put it on top of a wok or a big pot. And I steam it while I'm getting the family ready to go in the morning. And I eat my 1 pound of steamed vegetables. And if I start my day that way, I am so satiated and so balanced.
That's
But
amazing.
when I wait till the end of the day to get all my vegetables
Right.
in, it's just like,
Right.
oh, whatever. I kind of like want to make an excuse. So I get my vegetables in as soon as I can. So 1 pound of vegetables, and then I get another pound either for lunch or dinner, or I split it up. But I just found that just steam it, and then I can throw stuff on it. I can throw like a hot sauce on it, or some like coconut aminos, or some, Bragg's amino liquids, or, nutritional yeast, or whatever, or
Yeah.
cayenne or smoked paprika. And it might be the same. I could have like broccoli for an entire week if I wanted to, if I got lazy, but it always tastes different because I put different stuff on it. But I do rotate my vegetables, and man, that has been
That's so
such a
great. That's
life
such a good
changer.
tip. Thank you
Yes.
for teaching me that, because I tell people that all the time about exercise. Like if you exercise in the morning, you're much more likely to stick to an exercise regimen.
Yeah.
But it's true for vegetables too. Like I can totally see, and we have such a perturbed, crazy understanding of what breakfast is in this country. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like eat vegetables for breakfast. So yes, the 5 cups of
Yeah.
vegetables, but try to get at least 2 cups or a
For
cup at the
breakfast.
very
Yep.
least for breakfast.
Get two
Totally.
cups. Oh, come on. 1 cup is like a snack. One
Right,
cup,
right.
I
Two
could like,
cups.
I eat 1 cup like popcorn, man.
Yeah.
And if I have any leftover vegetables, cause I try to not eat after dinner,
Yep.
cause it's like, I don't need to fill up on calories to go to bed. Like, it's not like I'm running a marathon on my sleep. But if I
Right.
feel like a little peckish or crave something, I will eat steamed vegetables after dinner as a snack. And it's like, yeah, you know what? If you're hungry, you're hungry for vegetables. If you're hungry and you say
Hmm.
no to vegetables, then you're not really hungry. So I have to keep facing that. So more and more
Yeah.
vegetables. But I love it. 5 cups. That's our homework. We're gonna go do it.
Homework assignment. Okay.
Awesome.
Next time I'm on, I'm going to check in on everybody. So make sure you report back to Ashley that you're doing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ginger Nash. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show today. Can't wait to have you back.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Bye bye.
Hello, true health seeker. Have you ever thought about becoming a health coach? Do you love learning about nutrition and how we can shift our lifestyle and our diet so that we can gain optimal health and happiness and longevity? Do you love helping your friends and family to solve their health problems and to figure out what they can do to eat healthier? Are you interested in becoming someone who can grow their own business, support people in their success? Do you love helping people? You might be the perfect candidate to become a health coach. I highly recommend checking out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I just spent the last year in their health coaching certification program, and it really blew me away. It was so amazing. I learned over 100 dietary theories. I learned all about nutrition, but from a standpoint of how we can help people to shift their life and shift their lifestyle to gain true holistic health. I definitely recommend you check them out. You can Google Institute for Integrative Nutrition, or IIN, and give them a call, or you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach, and you can receive a free module of their training to check it out and see if it's something that you'd be interested in. Be sure to mention my name, Ashley James, in the Learn True Health podcast, because I made a deal with them that they will give you the best price possible. I highly recommend checking it out. It really changed my life to be in their program, and I'm such a big advocate that I wanted to spread this information. We need more health coaches. In fact, health coaching is the largest growing career right now in the health field. So many health coaches are getting in and helping people, because you can work in chiropractic offices, doctors' offices, you can work in hospitals, you can work online through Skype and help people around the world. You can become an author, you can go into the school system and help your local schools shift their programs to help children be healthier. You can go into senior centers and help them to shift their diet and lifestyle to best support them in their success and their health goals. There's so many different available options for you when you become a certified health coach. So check out IIN, check out the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, mention my name, get the best deal. Give them a call and they'll give you lots of free information and help you to see if this is the right move for you. Classes are starting soon. The next round of classes are starting at the end of the month. So you're going to want to call them now and check it out. And if you know anyone in your life who would be an amazing coach, please tell them about it. Being a health coach is so rewarding and you get to help so many people. Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.